The scent of incense mingled with the acrid aroma of myrrh, hovering over the fine fabrics that adorned the room. Amira al-Hassan felt the weight of the veil in her hands, a silk as delicate as a spider's web, yet to her it seemed like a shroud. Her eyes, accustomed to the open horizon of the desert, were now fixed on the intricate palace walls, each detail a silent reminder of the fate awaiting her. She was a piece, a link, a promise sealed even before her birth, and the marriage was merely the ceremony that would formalize her surrender. And what if blind obedience to destiny was the only path to true freedom? What you are about to discover will change how you view sacrifice and purpose. Stay until the end and see how an imposed bond can weave an unbreakable love, transforming what seemed like a prison into a legacy of power and affection. Far away in the austere halls where generations of leaders had forged an empire, Sheikh Tariq bin Rashid felt the noose tighten. His father's words still echoed in his ears, every syllable heavy with centuries of tradition. Marry her, or lose the throne. It was not a request, but a decree, a sentence. Tariq, heir to an ancient kingdom, found himself cornered. His father, the Sultan, ruled with an iron hand, and his will was the unquestionable law. It was duty, family honor, the kingdom's stability at stake. But what about his own life, and the choice denied to him? The silence of his office, usually a refuge for his thoughts, had become an echo of his own helplessness. He paced the Persian rugs, each step heavy as if carrying the burden of his entire people. The crown, once his greatest desire, now felt like an anchor, pulling him down into an abyss of passionless obligations. The bride, Amira al-Hassan, was just a name, a distant face he'd seen in official portraits. A woman from an influential tribe, yes, but to him, merely a symbol of the sacrifice he was about to make. There was no love, not even familiarity, only the cold logic of politics and lineage. Amira, for her part, lived in a world of resignation. Raised to understand her role, she knew her life did not belong to her. The prospect of marrying a man she barely knew, a powerful and distant sheikh, was less a romance and more a fusion of clans, an agreement to strengthen alliances and secure peace. Her days were filled with preparations, lessons in courtly etiquette, and the silent expectations of a life that would be more duty than desire. She watched the maids with their curious glances, the ladies of the court who studied her, each trying to decipher the woman behind the veil, the arranged bride carrying the future of two families. But deep inside, Amira kept a flame alive, a keen intelligence, a quiet strength that others underestimated. She was not a delicate flower waiting to be picked, but a seed planted in fertile soil, ready to sprout. Her daily life, once focused on the traditions and simple life of her tribe, was now transforming into a labyrinth of rituals and protocols. Every piece of jewelry, every embroidery on her wedding dress, was a reminder of the opposite world she was being tied to. Sheikh Tariq, for his part, found himself in a dilemma. Family honor was an unbreakable chain, forged by generations of his ancestors. The weight of millennia-old traditions crushed any notion of personal choice. He was the heir, and his fate was sealed. Yet amidst this imposition there was a spark of rebellion, a silent question that haunted him. Was it possible to find himself, his own voice, his own purpose on a path already decided by others? The idea of a loveless marriage was a burden, a lifetime of appearances, a cold union to satisfy the crown. What did it mean to rule justly if his own heart was imprisoned? The image of Amira, the bride he never chose, haunted his thoughts, not as a nightmare but as a puzzle. Who was this woman who would be his wife, the mother of his children, the companion of his throne? Was she as resigned as she seemed, or was there something more behind that mysterious look? Tariq felt the pressure of the court, of the advisors of his very own father. They all expected him to perform his role, to accept his destiny. But as the wedding day approached, a strange feeling began to stir in his chest, a mix of apprehension and an almost imperceptible curiosity. What could it be? What would happen when two worlds, bound by the force of duty, were forced to collide? The answer was a mystery that would unfold with each new dawn. The answer was a mystery that would unfold with each new dawn. The days that followed became a whirlwind of silk, gold, and expectations. For Amira, the palace was a labyrinth of rituals and curious glances. Each corridor a new classroom where she was taught the intricate codes of court conduct. The ladies of the court, with their polished smiles and disguised whispers, were a constant reminder that she was no longer the desert girl. Her daily life, once marked by the calm rhythm of the sun and sand, was now dictated by strict schedules and dress rehearsals. She found herself before adorned mirrors, watching a stranger reflected in her own eyes, a bride bedecked with heavy jewels, but with the light heart of someone who had yet to surrender her essence. There was a day, during a lesson on the complexities of regional politics, when Amira inadvertently corrected one of the palace tutors about a historical detail of a neighboring tribe. Her knowledge, acquired through the legends and tales of her own people, was deeper and more nuanced than the official records. A momentary silence hung in the room, followed by surprised looks. She felt a blush rise to her cheeks, realizing how out of protocol her intervention had been. But for an instant, the true Amira, the curious and intelligent woman, had revealed herself, even if only briefly and untimely. Meanwhile, on the opposite side of the palace, Tariq felt the weight of the crown intensify. Meetings with counselors seemed longer, discussions about the kingdom's future more urgent. His father, the Sultan, watched him with a silent intensity, measuring every word, every gesture. The preparations for the wedding were a spectacle of grandeur, but for Tariq, each step was a move toward a life he had not chosen. He spent hours in his office reviewing documents, but his mind drifted to the figure of Amira. Who was this woman who, by a twist of fate, would become his queen? Was there more to her than the obedience and resignation everyone expected from a arranged bride? The first formal meeting before the ceremony was a meticulously orchestrated event. In one of the vast reception halls, under the glow of crystal chandeliers and rich tapestries, Tariq and Amira were introduced. The air was heavy with the formality and the expectation. Tariq, imposing in his royal attire, watched Amira approach, elegant in a dress that, although sumptuous, could not hide the inherent simplicity of her presence. Their eyes met for a moment, a flash of mutual curiosity, before the bows and protocol greetings took over. The conversation was superficial, filled with rehearsed phrases and restrained smiles, a choreographed dance of two souls trapped in a theater of appearances. Yet Tariq could not help but notice the keen stillness in Amira's eyes, a depth that contrasted with the passive image he had been presented. And Amira in turn perceived that behind Tariq's aura of power and authority lay a subtle melancholy, a weariness that protocol couldn't conceal. They were two strangers bound by a decree, but beneath the surface, sharing an invisible burden. Tension rose when, weeks before the wedding, a crisis erupted. News arrived from a neighboring tribe, traditionally an ally, that had fallen victim to raider attacks. The situation was delicate. Tariq's kingdom relied on regional stability for its trade routes and, more importantly, for peace. The Sultan, aged and in frail health, appointed Tariq to lead the response. Amid an emergency meeting with the counselors, Amira, present as part of her royal education, listened attentively. When one counselor suggested an immediate military retaliation, Amira intervened with a surprisingly firm voice. She argued that a diplomatic and humanitarian approach could be more effective, offering aid and protection to the attacked tribe, which would solidify the alliance and isolate the raiders without unnecessary bloodshed. Her eyes shone with an intelligence Tariq had never expected. She spoke with the wisdom of someone familiar with life on the borders, the mentality of the tribes, and the invisible ties that bound the communities. The counselors, surprised, tried to dismiss her opinion as that of an inexperienced woman. But Tariq, intrigued, felt a spark of recognition. That small breach of protocol from Amira, her boldness in speaking out, was not weakness, but strength. He decided to give her suggestion a chance. Together they organized a caravan of aid, with supplies and a team of negotiators. Tariq, initially reluctant to share leadership, watched Amira interact with the affected tribe. She spoke their language fluently, understood their customs, and won over the people's trust with remarkable ease. She was not merely a princess, she was a bridge. The crisis forced them to work side by side, to make joint decisions, to face challenges that demanded more than titles. One night under the desert stars, as they discussed strategies, a moment of silence fell between them. Tariq looked at her, not as his imposed fiancée, but as a partner, a strategist, a woman of immeasurable worth. Amira returned the gaze, seeing in him not just the future king but a man searching for purpose, a man who, despite all his power, carried his own insecurities. That night, the invisible barrier between them began to crumble. Formality gave way to a more genuine exchange of ideas, to a respect not dictated by tradition but forged in adversity. They were not merely fulfilling a duty, they were building something together. The kingdom was in danger, but paradoxically, it was this threat that was uniting their destinies in a way that the arranged marriage never could. The success of the diplomatic mission was undeniable. The neighboring tribe, pacified and grateful for the help, reaffirmed their loyalty to the kingdom of Tariq, and the marauders were isolated, their escape routes cut off. But the true triumph was not in the sealed agreements or the restored peace. It was in the exchanged glances between Tariq and Amira, in the nightly conversations beneath the tents, where the desert stars seemed silent witnesses to a burgeoning connection. Back at the palace, the formality that once enveloped them seemed as thin as paper. Smiles were still restrained in public, gestures still measured by protocol, yet there was an invisible current binding them. Tariq, watching Amira walk through the palace gardens, no longer saw merely the imposed bride. He saw the woman who, with ancient wisdom and unexpected courage, had diffused an imminent conflict and earned the respect of a people. He saw the intelligence in her eyes, the strength in her stance. One morning, while reviewing reports on the reconstruction of the villages, Amira pointed out a discrepancy in the supply numbers, identifying a subtle diversion that the counselors had overlooked. "This is more than just an administrative error, my Sheikh," she said, her voice low but firm. "It's an act of sabotage." A chill ran through Tariq. Her observation was precise, alarming. He realized that Amira's mind operated on a different plane, perceiving patterns where others saw only chaos. He didn't just trust her, he admired her. In a vulnerable moment, during a rainy afternoon when the palace felt dimmer, Tariq confided in Amira the burden he carried. "The throne is not just power, Amira," he murmured, watching the rain beat against the window. "It's a prison of expectations. My father, my people, they all expect perfection, but I am just a man." Amira listened silently without judgment. She understood that imposed solitude, the burden of being a symbol. "They expect a leader, Tariq," she replied, her voice gentle but filled with a wisdom that seemed to transcend her years. "And a leader, above all, is human. It is in his humanity that his true strength resides." At that moment, Tariq felt a relief he hadn't known in a long time. She was not just a bride. She was a confidant, a soulmate in his isolation. The trust between them grew every day. Tariq began consulting her on matters of state, seeking her perspective, valuing her intuition. Amira, in turn, felt more comfortable expressing her opinions, sharing her visions for the kingdom. The marriage, once an imposing shadow, was beginning to take on a new meaning. From an imposition, it was transforming into a potential partnership. But fate, always cunning, had other plans. The calm after the crisis was merely the surface of a turbulent sea. Soon, a series of disturbing incidents began to shake the court. Important documents disappeared, confidential information leaked to rival kingdoms, and malicious rumors about Amira's lineage and the legitimacy of her future role as queen started to circulate. It was a subtle but relentless campaign, orchestrated by a faction within the palace itself, led by Tariq's cousin, an ambitious and envious man who had always coveted the throne. With every new attack, Tariq felt his anger grow. He knew he was the main target, but Amira was being used as a pawn, her honor and safety threatened. The shocking revelation came through a loyal informant. The cousin had planned not only to destabilize Tariq's reign, but also to forge evidence that Amira was of bastard lineage, invalidating the marriage and paving the way for him to seize power. Amira's life was in imminent danger. Tariq was faced with an impossible choice. Defending Amira openly would mean exposing the rot within the court, openly challenging a powerful faction, and risking civil war. Backing down would condemn Amira to ostracism, perhaps death, and mean losing the woman who, against all odds, had become essential to him. The crown, the duty, the kingdom, all seemed pale compared to the threat to the one who now held his heart. He knew he had to act, and quickly. On a dark night, Tariq summoned his most loyal guards and, in secret, moved Amira to a safe refuge outside the palace, an ancestral fortress hidden in the mountains, where she would be protected while he faced the storm. This was not the action of a calculating king, but of a man taking a radical stand to protect the woman he loved. It was an act that defied tradition, ignored the counsel of his elders, and put his own position at risk. But he didn't care. Amira's life was more precious than any throne. As he bade her farewell under the flickering light by the lamplight, Tariq held her hands, a firm and warm touch that broke through all barriers. "I will return to you, Amira," he promised. His eyes locked onto hers without any formality, without any royal veil. "And when I come back, it will be to bring you back as my queen, not by decree, but by choice. Our choice." Amira, tears welling in her eyes, felt the weight of that promise, the depth of that gesture. She was no longer a pawn in the game of power. She was the center of Tariq's universe, and he, the man she had never chosen, had become her shield, her protector, her destiny. From that moment on, the game changed. Tariq, once a hesitant prince, transformed into a lion. His fury was cold, calculated, but driven by a feeling he never imagined he would experience. He would unravel the conspiracy, purge the court, and reclaim his throne. But above all, he would reclaim Amira. The battle for the kingdom had become a battle for love, and he would not hesitate to fight for both. Tariq returned to the palace with a cold determination, each step echoing the promise he had made to Amira. The court, enshrouded in whispers and intrigue, felt like a nest of vipers, and he knew he had to act with surgical precision. His eyes, now sharper, watched every movement, every averted glance, searching for the cracks in loyalty that his cousin, the ambitious Jamil, had exploited. He summoned his most loyal guards, men of unwavering honor, and gave them clear and discreet instructions. The investigation began in the shadows, combing through records, intercepting messages, following leads that pointed to Jamil's accomplices. Every scrap of paper, every testimony, was a piece in the intricate puzzle of betrayal. Meanwhile, in the ancestral fortress nestled among rocky peaks, Amira was far from idle. The refuge, though secure, was no prison for her mind. She spent her days studying the ancient scrolls in the fortress library, delving into the history and military strategies of her ancestors. Her knowledge of desert tribe tactics, the art of diplomacy, and the psychology of peoples, which had once seemed merely a pastime, was now becoming a vital tool. She sent coded messages to Tariq through trusted messengers, sharing her own analyses of the court's power structure and identifying potential allies and enemies. Her perspective, emerging from outside the palace whirlwind, was a beacon, offering Tariq a clarity he couldn't find amid the fog of intrigue. The weeks dragged on, tense and dangerous. Tariq felt the noose tightening around Jamil. The evidence piled up, irrefutable. Forged documents, testimonies from bribed guards, records of secret meetings with emissaries from rival kingdoms. The conspiracy's web was vast and deep. With each new discovery, Tariq's anger solidified, along with his determination to protect the kingdom and, above all, Amira. He knew the confrontation couldn't be delayed much longer. The court was restless, rumors spreading like wildfire, and Amira's absence was starting to be questioned. It was time to act. Tariq convened an extraordinary council, gathering the elders, counselors, and leaders of the most influential tribes. The atmosphere was heavy, laden with expectation and apprehension. Jamil, with his arrogant posture and a sly smile, sat among the nobles, certain of his impunity. But Tariq was no longer the hesitant prince. He was the future sultan, forged in the fire of adversity and driven by a love that gave him unwavering strength. With a voice that echoed through the halls, he presented the evidence one by one, revealing Jamil's betrayal and the full extent of his conspiracy. Each document, each testimony, was a blow against the cousin's facade of loyalty. Jamil, initially shocked, tried to deny, attempted to divert attention, hurling accusations against Tariq and, once again, against Amira's lineage. But Amira, anticipating such a move, had provided Tariq with precise information about Jamil's very origins, exposing a stain in his own ancestry that disqualified him from any claim to the throne. Tariq's words, supported by irrefutable evidence and Amira's strategic insight, dismantled every argument Jamil made. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the heavy breaths of those present. The elder's eyes turned to Jamil, not with anger, but with profound disappointment. The faction supporting Jamil crumbled under the weight of the truth. There was no need for bloodshed. The court's judgment was unanimous. Jamil was stripped of his titles and exiled, his blind ambition sealing his own fate. The palace was purged, the traitors removed, and order restored. But Tariq's victory was not merely political. It was personal. He had defended his kingdom, but more importantly, he had defended the woman he loved. The crown was no longer a burden, but a symbol of his commitment to justice and the future he would build alongside Amira. With the court pacified and the internal threat neutralized, Tariq set off toward the fortress, his heart lighter than ever before. He rode beneath the unrelenting desert sun, each dune seeming like a smaller obstacle in the face of the reunion awaiting him. Upon arrival, Amira awaited him in the courtyard, not with the formality of a bride, but with the quiet dignity of a queen. Their eyes met, and the distance that once separated them, the distance of duty, of imposition, of inertia, vanished. Tariq dismounted and walked toward her, extending his hand. There was no need for grand words. That simple, direct gesture was the purest declaration of his choice. Amira accepted his hand, feeling the strength and sincerity in his touch. She was no longer the resigned bride, but a partner, an advisor, a woman who had found her purpose amid the chaos. "The kingdom is safe, Amira," Tariq said, his voice choked with emotion. "And you are safe. Return to your home. Return to our home." Amira smiled, a smile that lit up the fortress courtyard, a smile of relief and love. She knew this was not the end of her journey, but its true beginning. The journey of two souls who, united by decree, had found a greater purpose, an unbreakable bond, and a love that defied all expectations. The return to the palace was different. It was no longer the arrival of an arranged bride, but the return of a queen. The people who had once viewed her with curiosity and speculation now hailed her with respect and admiration. The story of her wisdom during the diplomatic crisis and her role in uncovering the conspiracy had already spread. Amira walked beside Tariq, not a step behind but side by side, a symbol of a new era of governance. The marriage, once destined to be a cold formality, would now become the celebration of a union forged in adversity, mutual trust, and true love. They had overcome the imposition of fate, transforming it into a conscious choice, a partnership promising a future of prosperity and justice for the kingdom. The ceremony would be more than a ritual. It would be the seal of a legacy. The wedding day, once feared as the seal of an imposed life, burst forth with a different brilliance. It was no longer the shadow of a duty, but the promise of a beginning. The palace, purged of intrigue and betrayal, breathed an air of renewal. Every tapestry, every intricate mosaic seemed to vibrate with a new energy. The city streets, adorned with flowers and banners, overflowed with a people who, aware of the recent crisis and the courage of their future leader and his bride, celebrated not just a royal union, but the restoration of hope. Amira, in her silk dress embroidered with gold threads, felt her heart beat to a different rhythm. It was not the silent despair of old, but a complex emotion, the dignity of one who chooses her own path, even amid a predetermined fate. As she was being prepared, she looked at herself in the mirror, no longer seeing an adorned stranger, but a woman who had discovered her own strength. Her eyes, once mysterious, now reflected unwavering clarity. She was not only the bride, she was the queen the kingdom needed, forged in the fire of adversity. Tariq, for his part, waited in the great hall, where sunlight filtered through stained glass, painting the floor with vibrant colors. He wore not only the insignia of his office, but the armor of a man who had fought for his truth. The crown, which once weighed like a burden, now seemed light, a reminder of his promise to Amira. He had faced the darkness of betrayal and emerged with renewed purpose. His gaze swept over the guests, a sea of expectant faces, and he knew that the battle had been won, not just for the crown, but for the heart. When Amira appeared on the threshold of the hall, a reverent silence fell. It was not the quiet of submission, but respect for a presence radiating wisdom and grace. Her eyes met Tariq's, and in that instant, amidst hundreds of curious eyes, the outside world disappeared. There were no longer protocols or expectations, only the truth of two beings who recognized each other, who chose each other. The ceremony, conducted by the kingdom's elders, was grand, but it was in the small gestures that the true story was revealed. When Tariq pronounced his vows, his voice, firm and laden with emotion, spoke not only of duty, but of a partnership forged in the soul. "With this crown," he said, lifting the queen's crown before placing it on Amira's head, "I offer you not just a throne, but a shared purpose. May we rule together, with justice and the wisdom that only the union of two hearts can bring." Feeling the weight of the crown, Amira also felt the lightness of her own voice as she responded. "With this alliance," she declared, showing the ring on her finger, "I accept not only the honor of being your queen, but the responsibility of being your partner. May our paths, once separated by fate, now intertwine to build a future of prosperity and compassion for our people." It was not a passionate declaration of love, but a vow of partnership, mutual respect, and a higher purpose, one that resonated more deeply than any idealized romance. The court applauded, not out of obligation, but from genuine recognition of the authenticity of that moment. Yet, not everyone was satisfied. Amid the celebration, one of the elders, a conservative man who had secretly supported Jamil, stood up. His voice, laden with ancient authority, cut through the air. "Amira's lineage is from a lesser tribe," he questioned, fixing his eyes on Tariq, "and her intervention in the affairs of state has so far been unprecedented. How can we be sure that this union will bring the stability the kingdom so desperately needs?" A tense silence fell over the hall. It was the final confrontation, not with swords, but with words, an attempt to undermine Amira's legitimacy, and, by extension, Tariq's. But Tariq did not hesitate. He turned to the elder, standing tall, his eyes conveying unshakable calm. "Wisdom isn't measured by the antiquity of one's lineage, but by the depth of the heart and the clarity of the mind," Tariq answered, his voice echoing with the authority of a true leader. "Amira not only saved our kingdom from war, but uncovered the betrayal that threatened to destabilize it from within. Her worth is not precedent but established by her actions. She is my queen by merit, by intelligence, and by a partnership we will honor above all else." Standing beside Tariq, Amira did not shrink back. She looked at the elder, her eyes steady, without defiance, but with silent conviction. "My people taught me that the strength of a tree does not lie in its height, but in the depth of her roots," she said, her voice soft yet laden with undeniable truth. "My roots are in this kingdom now, and my commitment is to its future, alongside my husband." Amira's response, as serene as it was powerful, disarmed the elder. He had no arguments against the truth. Murmurs of approval spread through the court and the questioning dissolved like smoke. In that moment, Amira not only chose Tariq, but chose herself, rejecting any attempt at manipulation or devaluation. She had become an undeniable force, a voice to be heard. The celebration continued, but with a new layer of meaning. The feast, the dances, the music, all seemed a testament to resilience and the ability to find light even on the darkest paths. Tariq and Amira danced together, not with the formality of a royal pair, but with the lightness of two souls who had found their rhythm. Every glance, every smile, was a silent confirmation of the bond that united them, a tie stronger than any decree. The kingdom, which had once seen its future as uncertain, now saw in Tariq and Amira the promise of a new era, an era where tradition would meet innovation, where strength would be tempered by wisdom, and where duty would be guided by love. Their union was not the end of a saga, but the true beginning of a reign to be remembered not only for its grandeur, but for its humanity. They had found amid an imposed fate a choice, and that choice, forged in adversity, promised a lasting legacy. Years unfolded like the finest silk veils, one after another, revealing a transformed realm. Tariq and Amira, now Sultan and Sultana, did not rule from isolated thrones but from a vibrant center of activity, where the voices of the people were as important as the counsel of the elders. The formality that once defined them gave way to a fluid partnership, a dance of minds and hearts moving in unison for the good of their nation. The palace, once a labyrinth of intrigue, became a beacon of innovation. Amira, with her tribal wisdom and sharp intellect, implemented reforms that resonated throughout the kingdom. She founded the houses of knowledge, schools open to all, regardless of origin or gender, where not only sacred scriptures were taught, but also history, mathematics, and the arts. Her dream, once a closely guarded secret, of seeing her people thrive through education and critical thinking, blossomed. She believed that the true strength of a kingdom lay in the intelligence and adaptability of its people, not merely in its wealth or military power. Tariq, for his part, embraced this vision with a passion that the luxury of his birth could never have inspired. He abandoned the lavish banquets and royal hunts that once filled his days, replacing them with frequent visits to the most remote villages, listening to the concerns of farmers, merchants, and artisans. His presence, once distant and ceremonial, became approachable, a symbol of a leader who understood the needs of his people. Investments in water infrastructure transformed arid lands into fertile fields, and new trade routes were established, not to enrich the court but to ensure the prosperity of all. The luxury of his life was not completely forsaken, but its purpose changed. Every ornament, every celebration, became a tool to strengthen alliances and celebrate achievements that benefited everyone, not just a few. The union of Tariq and Amira produced not only a prosperous kingdom but also a family. 2 children, a boy and a girl, were born to inherit the legacy. The crown prince, Rashid, bore his father's quiet determination, but had his mother's curious eyes and keen mind. The princess, Samira, was a ray of sunshine with Amira's grace and Tariq's ability to inspire loyalty. They were not merely the next generation of rulers. They were the embodiment of love that blossomed from an imposed fate, living proof that resilience and partnership could shape a bright future. Their parents raised them not to be mere symbols, but compassionate and intelligent leaders, teaching them that true nobility resided in serving the people and pursuing justice. Life in the palace, although still governed by certain traditions, was infused with a new spirit. On a sunny afternoon, during an important council meeting about land distribution, a young scribe, inexperienced and visibly nervous, made a procedural error. He interrupted one of the most respected elders to present an alternative map, more detailed and with an innovative solution to an ancient border dispute. The elder, surprised by the boldness, furrowed his brow, and a heavy silence fell over the room, reminding many of the incident years earlier when Amira had challenged a tutor. Tariq and Amira's eyes met. Where others saw insolence and a breach of etiquette, they saw the same spark of intelligence and courage that had brought them together. Tariq, with an almost imperceptible smile, gestured for the young man to continue. Amira, in turn, encouraged the scribe with a nod, her eyes conveying understanding and support. The young man, emboldened, presented his proposal clearly and confidently, and the solution, though unconventional, was brilliant. That mistake was not punished. It was celebrated. This seemingly small moment reflected the profound change that Tariq and Amira had orchestrated in their realm. They had dismantled the culture of fear and conformity, replacing it with an environment where intelligence, initiative, and collective well-being were the true pillars. It was a scene repeated in many forms throughout the kingdom's daily life. Amira and Tariq had created an environment where innovation was valued and where every voice, even the humblest, was heard. They did not fear challenges to the norms, as long as it was for the greater good. The palace, once a place of rigid hierarchies, became a center of constructive debate, where ideas flowed freely. Amira's wisdom, once considered an intrusion, was now the backbone of many policies. She had proven that a woman's strength did not lie in submission, but in her capacity to lead and inspire. Tariq, by her side, was the embodiment of a king who did not fear sharing his power but amplified it through partnership, understanding that true authority was born from mutual respect and trust. With each passing year, Tariq and Amira's kingdom flourished, becoming an exemplar of prosperity and peace in a region frequently ravaged by conflict. Amira's houses of knowledge produced a new generation of thinkers and innovators, who traveled to distant lands, bringing back new ideas and technologies, ensuring the kingdom remained at the forefront of progress. Meanwhile, Tariq's agricultural reforms not only ensured that no one went hungry, but also transformed the local economy, creating surpluses that strengthened trade and diplomacy with neighboring nations. They did not just hold the throne, they redefined it, infusing it with a purpose that transcended power and wealth. The crown was no longer a symbol of absolute power but an emblem of service, a vow of care for the people, a legacy of justice and compassion. Their love, born from necessity and tempered by adversity, matured into a deep and unbreakable union. It was not a fairy tale love, free of challenges or moments of doubt, but a real love, forged in mutual understanding, unconditional respect, and the sharing of a greater purpose. They had learned that true freedom was not found in unrestricted choice, but in the ability to find meaning and passion even on paths that seemed predetermined. Fate had imposed a marriage, but they had chosen a love, a partnership, a legacy that would extend far beyond their own days. Fate had imposed a marriage, but they had chosen love, a partnership, a legacy that would extend far beyond their own days. The echoes of their decisions resonated not only within the walls of their kingdom, but throughout all neighboring lands, transforming the perception of what a just and prosperous government could be. In caravans crossing the desert and ships sailing the seas, merchants and diplomats carried not only goods but stories of Sultan Tariq and Sultana Amira, a couple who had proven that the strength of a nation was measured not only by its army, but by the happiness and well-being of its people. The houses of knowledge, once a bold vision of Amira, had multiplied, becoming centers of learning and innovation that attracted scholars from all over the world. Their teaching methods, which valued curiosity and debate over blind memorization, had generated a generation of young thinkers unafraid to question, innovate, and dream of an even brighter future. Many of these young people, trained under Amira's tutelage, were sent on diplomatic and commercial missions, not only to represent the kingdom but to learn and bring back new ideas, technologies, and perspectives that continued to enrich local culture and economy. Amira personally oversaw the curriculum, ensuring that the history of her people, the wisdom of their tribes, and the richness of their traditions were preserved and celebrated while making room for the new. Tariq, for his part, dedicated himself zealously to social justice. He reformed the legal system, making it more accessible and equitable for all, regardless of social standing. Public hearings were held regularly, where the Sultan personally heard the complaints and suggestions of his subjects, breaking down the barriers between ruler and ruled. His image, once that of a distant prince, had transformed into that of a leader who walked among his people, understanding their joys and sorrows. He invested heavily in building hospitals and training doctors, ensuring that health was a right, not a privilege. The kingdom's security, once threatened by internal intrigues and external foes, was now maintained not only by the strength of its warriors, but by the loyalty and love of a people who felt protected and valued. Their children, Rashid and Samira, grew up immersed in this environment of purpose and partnership. Rashid, the crown prince, spent hours with his father, learning the art of governance, subtle diplomacy, and the responsibility of a leader. But it was with Amira that he discussed philosophy and strategy, absorbing the tribal wisdom and his mother's progressive vision. Samira, the princess, had a natural inclination toward the arts and understanding people. She accompanied Amira on her visits to the houses of knowledge, enchanted by stories and poems, learning the importance of empathy and compassion. Both were prepared to lead, not with the arrogance of power but with the humility of service, understanding that their parents' legacy was built on the pillars of respect and unity. The relationship between Tariq and Amira, though mature, maintained the flame of a love that had deepened over time. There was no longer the urgency of beginnings, the surprise of discovery, but a comforting quietness, a mutual understanding that transcended words. In their private chambers, away from the eyes of the court, they shared not only the concerns of the kingdom but the small moments of affection, knowing smiles, the touch of hands that spoke volumes. They had learned to value each other's presence, the strength they found in their union, the peace their partnership brought. It was not an idealized love from troubadour songs, but a real love, tested and proven, that had chosen the solidity of rock over the ephemerality of sand. They had become symbols of a new era, where family honor was not just a matter of lineage but of character, where purpose was not imposed but discovered, and where luxury and superficiality gave way to a government focused on the needs of its people. The throne, which once represented a prison for Tariq, transformed into a beacon of hope, a place where justice and compassion met. And Amira, the bride he never chose, was the queen the kingdom needed, the voice of reason and innovation, the partner who completed Tariq and the realm. Together, they built a future that honored the past without being bound by it, a future where love and duty intertwined in an unforgettable legacy. This love, matured through storm and the serenity of years, was not the fleeting romance of tales, but the solid rock upon which a kingdom was rebuilt. Tariq and Amira, now in the full splendor of their reign, demonstrated daily that true strength did not lie in imposition, but in synergy, in the ability to listen and to serve. They embodied the idea that a ruler does not need to be a solitary tyrant, but a partner to their people. The legacy they built transcended geographical borders. It was an inheritance of values, where social justice and the pursuit of knowledge became non-negotiable pillars. The houses of knowledge, once a dream of Amira's and Tariq's agrarian reforms, once a bold venture, were now rooted institutions, flourishing and nourishing the minds and bodies of their people. With each new generation, the story of how an arranged bride and a reluctant prince found each other and transformed their world was told, not as a distant legend, but as a guide for the future. The story of Tariq and Amira echoed a profound truth. Destiny does not always offer the path we dream of, but it is in how we embrace it, shaping it with courage and compassion, that we find our true freedom and purpose. Their love, born from a decree, transformed into a daily choice, a testament that the most beautiful flowers can bloom even in the driest soil of obligation. They did not merely fulfill a duty, they redefined it, infusing it with the essence of their own humanity. At every dawn that bathed the kingdom in its golden light, Tariq and Amira's partnership was a living testimony, a testimony that sometimes the greatest mistake life imposes is actually destiny's push toward the deepest truth, toward a love that not only saves a throne but builds a future. And you, have you ever found yourself on a path that seemed imposed, yet turned out to be your greatest success? Share your story in the comments. Leave a like if this journey inspired you. Subscribe to the channel for more stories of transformed destinies, and hit the bell so you won't miss any of our narratives.